Hi, I'm Allie Reynolds with Allie's Organics, and I'm going to give you some worm composting tips. Some of the things that I've learned from experience is definitely use the red wiggler worms. That's probably the most important thing that you're going to be doing when you're composting with worms. The red wiggler worm is the best worm composter that there is. Night crawlers, not going to do it. But the red wigglers, they're just little workhorses. They're going to eat their weight of food every single day, as long as they're happy. One thing that you want to make sure is that their bedding is moist, but not overly moist. You can do a squeeze test for your bedding that is in here. If you got liquid coming out like that, that's too wet. So you want to make sure that it's dried out. If it is too wet like that, some things that you can do is to tear up some newspaper. It's dry. It'll help dry up that wet bedding that they're in. Worms don't like to be too wet. They'll drown. You can just take this, shred it up really fine. You can run it through a shredder even. And then you would just mix it into the bedding with your worms. One thing that I like to do is to keep a damp piece of newspaper over the top, several layers. As they're eating it, you'll just continue to add more. Underneath that newspaper, though, I like to put a nice layer of food. Things like coffee grounds, lettuce, and another thing is to have them chopped up really fine. It's easier for them to digest. And just put that over. Don't mix this in, because then you're going to create heat and it's going to cause them to compost. Inside, heat the worms up, they'll try to escape from it, and sometimes they can't, and then they'll end up killing them. Put back your several layers of newspaper over this. If you see foaming going on in here, it's either that they're too wet or they're too hot. Place to store these, they like to be about an average of 50 to 80 degrees. They don't like to be hot, they don't like to be cold. Don't put them in the sun. If you're at a place that's not too hot, you can keep them on your back porch, you can keep them in your garage. I made a mistake one time and kept mine in the greenhouse. It was too hot, the sun came down, burned them. The places that you can get your worms is most of your nursery centers have them during the springtime. We carry them in the springtime, but we don't carry them in the fall. You can mail order them. Usually it comes in a pound, sometimes less when you've got nursery centers, and you can start with 200 worms easily on a size like this right here. You can feed them kitchen scraps. Just make sure you don't feed them meat. Make sure you don't feed them any oil. You can also grind up some food. If you're a juicer, the leftovers of that is really great because it's in small pieces and they really are able to eat that quickly. And like I said, you can just put it over the top. You can also use junk mail, but you want to make sure that you don't have the plastic pieces in there if you're shredding it. The plastic windows that are in the envelopes, make sure that you don't put that in there. They can't decompose that, and there's no sense in having that in there. So basically, you want to be just feeding them probably about once a week. You'll be able to tell how fast they're eating it. Another thing, if they're kind of sluggish, feed them some alfalfa meal. They love alfalfa meal. It causes them to grow a lot faster. You can also feed them pancakes or noodles or any of the starches. They like that also. So it's just, they're kind of like garbage guts. They just eat everything. These little guys don't like citrus pills though. If you put them in there, don't put very many in there. Make sure they're really, really small, but just don't put very many in there. Another thing that they don't seem to eat a lot of is garlic and onions. You can put a little in there, but don't do too much. Don't overfeed these guys either. It's better to feed them every day, a little bit, rather than too much once a week. So there's your tips for composting worms.